All right, good morning, everyone. It's 7 a.m., May 31st, 2023, and we'll call this meeting of the Fergus Falls City Council Committee of the Whole to order. Roll call, please.
Rachel.
Here.
Hicks.
Hip.
Here.
Joel.
Here.
Norman.
Here.
Luker is absent. Enmeyer.
Here.
And Constance absent.
And we have a quorum this morning. And first item of discussion this morning will be on the open forum policy, and we'll call on our city administrator, Andrew Bremseth. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Your Honor, council members. Hope you're all doing well. This is a topic we've discussed several times, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. But in your packet, there were the proposed changes to the open forum sheet and policy. We received feedback, I think, from just Councilmember Kwame after we talked last time. So just real quickly, we're going to be eliminating the sign-up sheet because, as we mentioned, it'll be open for anybody as part of the agenda and part of our regular meetings. And then if we look at the actual policy itself, I'll just run through the changes. We removed the fact that was previously held prior to the meeting and now will be held during the meeting. Eliminated the section related to signing up in advance, like I just mentioned. We've clarified that participants don't necessarily have to state their address, but they do have to state their name and declare whether or not they are a resident of the city. That was based on feedback from a gentleman at the last city council meeting. And then we just added that speakers will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes unless additional time is granted by the mayor or the chair of the meeting. So that'll be at the discretion of the chair. The only change I don't think that we accepted of Councilmember Kwame's was the use of city technology. Our IT department is not comfortable with having somebody hand us a stick or anything to plug into the system, not knowing what's on that, if it's a corrupted file, if it's something that's inappropriate in nature, we don't want to have it televised or displayed on the screen. So really we're trying to stay away from that. People are free to bring paper copies and distribute to the council. We certainly will help people if they want to send things, days in advance, and we have the ability to check what the file is. We can have that up on the screen like we do for staff, but we want to avoid the last second kind of plug in and play sort of thing. And Councilmember Kwame also previously brought up a document camera, and our IT department is researching what that could look like and what that would mean with our system. So that may be a possibility. Don't have a definitive answer on that today. So I'm suggesting that we add the open forum as part of our agenda under petitions and communications, which is right towards the top of our agenda. It would be right after our public hearings, which are notified in the newspaper at 5:30. So we want to make sure those happen when they're scheduled. Then it would be awarding of bids. Then it would be open forum prior to the council jumping into any of their other business. Certainly, if somebody's here to speak on behalf of something that happens prior to that on the agenda, they would have the ability to do so prior to the open forum. And the open forum will continue to be used for topics that are not on the agenda, as the mayor or the chair has the ability to allow people to participate on items on the agenda. So by resolution, we can adopt those changes.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do we have a maximum number of people that can do this?
We don't have a maximum number of people, but we do say in here that speakers will not be permitted to speak on the same subject more than 2 times within a 12-month period. So it's not, we're not hearing.
But I mean, in one evening, how many people can?
We don't currently have a maximum. If if that turns into a problem and the council says we're spending too much time on it, we can certainly address that. I know some cities will allot 30 minutes and, with 3-minute limit, you get about 10 speakers. I don't anticipate we're going to run into that issue, but if we do, we'll address it at that point in time.
Thanks, Andrew. Scott?
Just a couple of comments. One minor edit. In the first bullet point, it talks, the last sentence reads, "It is not to make a presentation." The point of the open forum is for people to make comments, ask questions, whatever it might be. And yet in item number 5, it says individual presentations on an issue. The use of the word presentations, I think, is confusing, and in line 5, I would suggest we replace the word presentations with comments.
Sure.
Minor edit.
Yep, good.
And then the last item, as far as the use of city technology, I'd like to, again, suggest that the city find a way that if someone comes in with a photo or a document, that we ought to be able to just lay it on the table and have everybody be able to see it. And it's a relatively inexpensive technology that I think our city ought to be able to provide.
Thanks, Scott. I think you mentioned that IT is looking into.
Yep, we have the sheet that you gave us a couple months ago, and IT is researching if that's the right model or if a different model, and how that incorporates into this projector system here, so.
Yeah. So how that would be written in that, I don't know. But I think just saying it's not allowed is one thing, but to say it would be allowed to some degree or with review or upon acceptance by the mayor or something like that, I think would be a more appropriate way, and then we wouldn't have to come back and rewrite this.
We'll soften that. We can soften that between now and Monday, and something that kind of, makes it clear we're not physically plugging anything into our system. But if there's technology present that, could be used without that, like laying a document on a camera, that's fine. We'll soften that up before Monday.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Andrew. So we can bring this to the council for action on Monday through a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Scott. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Next item on the agenda is an airport maintenance and operations grant discussion. We'll call on our city engineer, Brian Navarro. Good morning, Brian.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Honor, and members of the council. Yes, in addition to the state of Minnesota and federal grant programs that we utilize for our capital improvement projects at the Fergus Falls Municipal Airport, the state also provides funding to supplement the annual airport operations through the state of Minnesota Airport Maintenance and Operation Grant, M&O grant. The attached, I have included the term for state fiscal year 2024 and 2025. This is a two-year term. Maintenance and operations grants. I've provided the past year's summary of those amounts. Currently, the state is offering for state fiscal year 24 and 25, 75% reimbursement for eligible items not exceeding $70,606. Some of the eligible items include heating, electricity, parts for building maintenance, things of that nature. Pavement repairs are eligible and reimbursed at a 75% rate. So by accepting these grants, the state requires the airport to be maintained, maintenance safety standards, and for these funds, this is just very similar to all the other grant assurance programs we do. And like I mentioned, we've been accepting maintenance and operation grants for many decades when offered through. So at this time, I'm requesting a resolution accepting the state of Minnesota Airport Maintenance and Operations grant offer for state fiscal years 2024 and 25.
Thank you, Brian. And we can do that through
I will
a
offer
motion
that,
to
Your
the
Honor.
council. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Scott. Question?
Just one question. The number, the amount of this grant is determined apparently by the state. Do we have some application process, or how do they come up with the number? I just noted that it actually went down from last year. I would have expected it to go up like everything else.
Yeah, no, these are just offerings that they submit to we don't have a grant application process in previous. These are just, I guess, appropriations from the state and appropriated
So
accordingly to the.
Doesn't have to do with our budgets or anything. It's just a
No.
number they throw out there.
No.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Any other questions for Brian? There's a motion to bring this to the council. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Next up is the transfer of airport entitlement funds. And again, Brian Navarro.
Thank you. Yes, just another little background. The Fergus Falls Municipal Airport receives $150,000 annually in federal entitlement dollars. These are used for applicable projects at the Fergus Falls Municipal Airport. Basically, the city can accrue 4 years up to $600,000 in these entitlement funds. If they're not spent at our airport, these entitlement funds are turned back to the FAA and added to the FAA's discretionary funding account, which can be used for a project in any airport across the country. So keep in mind, not state, goes to the entire U.S. So we've been spending our entitlement dollars, but in the following years, we have done some transfers. We did a payback to the city of Walker. I think we did borrow some of their entitlement funds for a recent SRE, snow removal equipment acquisition. We have a current balance of $141,369. There is another airport that we've had previously. We've done entitlement transfers for. This is the Red Wing Regional Airport. They're looking to complete an access road rehabilitation project, and they're short $75,000 of entitlement dollars. We have sufficient balance, and the city of Fergus Falls and Red Wing have had previously transfers for both to help both our airports, and we've had a very good relationship with it. So at this time, the city of Red Wing is requesting to borrow $75,000 of Fergus Falls Municipal Airport entitlement funds. In order to do this, I've attached a FAA agreement form 5100-110. So at this time, I'm requesting myself and the city attorney to execute these agreements and transfer of $75,000 to the Red Wing Regional Airport between the city of Fergus Falls. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And we can bring this to the council.
I'll make the motion. I've got a question.
Sure.
I'll second. I got a question too.
All right, Anthony, go ahead, and then Scott.
Are we saving? Have we got a project in mind that, like down the road, where we would like to kind of collect quite a bit of money for?
We,
'Cause I know that's what we did last time. We pushed them out and then brought them back together to bring, a bigger project to the table.
yeah, we of course, we have some really large projects, especially our taxi lane reconstruction projects. I don't have a definitive year, but we will be looking at discretionary funds. Like I mentioned, the size of that project's going to be million plus. You're banking 600. We're going to probably need other airport entitlement funds plus discretionary funds to get that project complete.
Right.
But between this, we just recently passed a council authorized agreement between SCH for that master planning document. That's not using federal entitlement dollars. That's using BIL funds, discretionary funds. So we do have that balance, because if we did not have those bill funds, we would not be able to do that master planning. So under the terms of this one between Red Wing, we have that master plan project that we're going to be starting. That's going to take over a year. If we make this transfer to Red Wing, they will be repaying us next year. So it's pretty much use of funds that will help a partner of ours in the past.
Right. Thanks, Brian.
And he answered my question already.
Got it. Efficiency. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Are there any other questions of Brian before we vote on this? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. All right, again, Brian Navarro will discuss Oak Street vacation petition.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, recently, city staff, we've received a petition for the above reference platted area. This is the platted Oak Street right-of-way between blocks 6 and 7, Nelson's second addition to the city. Up on the screen right here is the subject area, how it highlighted the Oak Street right-of-way in question. The new owners of blocks 6 and 7 are requesting the vacation of Oak Street. Oak Street is dedicated 75-foot right-of-way between blocks 6 and 7, bounded generally between St. Charles Avenue to the north and private property to the south. To date, this right-of-way has not been developed since initial platting. So if acceptable, the procedural steps moving forward are I'm going to be requesting a public hearing for July 3rd, 2023. Notices will be sent out to all abutting properties, including not only the owners to the west and east, but also to the south, and then also to private utility companies. Any comments received back will be presented at the public hearing if this petition is accepted. So at this time, Your Honor, I'm requesting to accept the petition, the Oak Street vacation petition, and also to set the public hearing date for July 3rd, 2023.
Thanks, Brian.
I'll offer that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks, Al. Questions for Brian? Hey, Brian, just so, when this is platted, you said it's private property to the south, was there planned? Is it platted to the south that just didn't match up, or how does that work?
No, it's not platted to the south, and that's why we'll be giving notice to the adjacent owner. When you look at this general area and everything, and that land to the south, in my opinion, there is a very low wetland area, and there's not a lot of developable property along there too.
Sure.
So in consideration, my comments, my opinion, if that was actually paved Oak Street, what we're looking at release or vacate, it's not very conducive to any development to the south right there to build a road when if some of those developable lots to the south were subdivided, I would recommend driveways come off of the existing Oak Street,
Got it.
in that manner. But like I mentioned, we will give notice to that owner and everything, so if they have any comments to provide.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. Any other questions, Scott?
Since this is apparently city-owned property, has the city been plowing this or maintaining this in any way? Has it been mowed or taken care of in any way?
I don't believe so.
No,
I can
we
an-
haven't done anything to it.
I can answer that.
The previous owners had been maintaining it.
The Anderson family's taken care, Otto's taken care of that piece of property for 50 years, so, yeah.
All right. We have a motion to bring this to the council. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. All right, next up is public improvements 5364 and 5365, the mill and overlay project and seal coat improvements. And we'll call on Brian Navarro again.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, we've been evaluating local street candidates that will receive a bituminous mill and overlay and seal coat application. These are two types of street applications that are considered preventive maintenance strategies that the city contracts on an annual basis throughout the city. Sidewalk pedestrian ramps will also be improved to meet ADA standards in the neighborhoods that receive bituminous mill and overlay. Per city policy, we've been now evaluating street candidates to receive a mill and overlay in Ward 3. Seal coats, like I mentioned, are citywide. We don't have the exact candidates selected yet, but we are looking at Park Street and Escogmo Boulevard and a few others if we have budgeted funds to complete these projects. Like I mentioned, Park and Escogmo are tentative at this time. It's subject to change, but those are the primary ones we are looking at right now. If acceptable, staff will prepare the project plans and cost estimates prior to requesting authorization to advertise for bids at a later date, but it will happen within the next month. Currently, the city budgets in 2023 budgeted $296,140 for bituminous mill and overlays, and approximately $156,780 for seal coat applications. These budget amounts generally include not only construction costs, but also engineering and contingency costs, total project costs. So at this time, I'm requesting 4 items. Initiate public improvement 5364. That's 2023 mill and overlay improvement program. I'm also requesting to order the project plans and specifications for public improvement 5364. Third request is to initiate public improvement 5365. This is the 2023 seal coat improvement project. And the fourth final request is to order the project plans and specifications for public improvement 5365. And I'll open up to any questions you might have.
Thanks, Brian. And we can bring all 4 of these items to the council Monday night with one motion. Scott, would you like to offer that?
I'll offer that and have a question.
Certainly. Someone like to second?
I'll second it because
Thanks.
it's in my ward.
Thanks, Anthony. Scott, go ahead.
I think that it's terrific that we'd be moving forward on these projects to get some road work done in town. The question I have is regarding Park Street in particular, since there's active construction along there with the Rognes development, if it might be smart to wait one more year until the homes along that street finish what they're doing so that what gets tore up is then repaired with the overlay. Unless there's some piece of that puzzle that I'm missing, it seems like we'd be maybe 1 year ahead of the game on that particular street. As for Skogmo, I don't see any problem there. My guess is that the residents of Ward 3 would probably have lots of suggestions for you, but that was the only comment I'd like to make.
Brian?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Councilmember Kwame. That's my knowledge, all the utility installations from Park Street that were constructed last year to serve the property, the Rognes development to the west, along with all the curb cuts for the new driveway openings. So I don't anticipate any more excavations in the street associated with that project.
Okay.
But very good point, yes, that would something we do consider. Try to.
Other questions? All in favor of bringing this to the council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 6 is Public Improvement 9504 Aquatic Center Improvement Project. We'll call him Brian. I know that Anthony has a comment on this one as well.
Yeah, it was, I mean, my kind of thought was that I know there's a number of people that want to comment publicly on this as well, and that want to come to the council meeting on Monday night, particularly regarding the trees. And I just wonder, in the essence of efficiency, if we discuss it now, we're going to reiterate it and rehash it again on Monday night. So when there's a more of the public are present. And so I wonder if we can push this to skip it today and push it to Monday night.
Thanks, Anthony.
It's up to the rest of the council.
We could just table this till Monday night if that's all right with staff.
I just got one question before
Yeah,
a second.
no.
Brian, why is that number so big? The architect number? I mean, I know something about, is there a percentage of what the cost is or how it works? Just
Yeah.
explain that to me, that's all I want to know.
It's generally 8.7% of the total construction, the total
Okay.
project cost.
Okay, that's all, I wanted to know that number. Thank you.
So if it's all right with Scott?
The resolution as it's presented really doesn't have anything to do with trees. This is all about the change that the legislation has brought by allowing us this additional $3 million, and then what it does for the fees for JLG. So I don't see why we can't just go forward with this.
Sounds good. Brian, go ahead and proceed.
Oh. Sorry, thank you. Okay, back in January, the city council accepted the professional services agreement from GLD Architects in an amount of $681,820, or 8.7% of the total project cost of $7.8 million project. We accepted at that time because we did not have the legislative state approval for the additional $3 million to have a $10.8 million project that was determined as a needed based on the previous reports. So like I mentioned recently, we've just approved to do the $3 million request and increase local option sales tax to fully fund a $10.8 million project. So pursuant to JLG's professional services proposal, their basic service fees shall be adjusted according to the 8.7% rate for a $10.8 million project that equates to $939,600. And I just want to make a note, I did have some slight error in there. I'm off $3,000 between, so the real correct number is $939,600. So if acceptable, we have continued, we're making great progress on preparing the plans and specifications. We're anticipating getting bidding in June or late July, contingent on council approval. I'm estimating that we're hoping maybe early July to be coming back to the council to present exhibits and total cost estimates with the project as it is right now for a $10.8 million project. So at this, like I mentioned, the local option sales tax is used to publicly finance the project bonds as a current funding mechanism. And as it is right now, the project is fully funded with a total project cost of $10.8 million. I just want to note with the $10.8 million, we are looking to bid alternates and everything as well. We're based on the construction market and everything. We're looking very diligently on what features we're looking to include in Aquatic Center. So unless there's any questions, so I'm going to be requesting a resolution accepting JLG Architects professional service proposal for design, development, construction administration in an amount of $939,600.
Thanks, Brian. And we can bring this to the council for consideration on Monday night, and we can also, of course, welcome any public comment specific to the project at that time as well. So we'll get a motion to bring this to the council.
I'll offer that, Your Honor.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks. Second.
Second.
Scott, question? All right, all in favor of bringing this to the council on Monday, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next, we'll call on Chief Ryan Muckow of the Fire Department to discuss the joint cooperative agreement. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Could have just handed this over to Brian. He's well versed in contracts. And no, I come for you today looking to renew our Otter Tail County Fire Department's mutual aid contract, or the longer terms joint cooperative agreement for use of emergency operations personnel and equipment. We've been a part of this mutual aid contract since its inception, probably well over 20 years ago. and it was up for renewal this year. It gets renewed about every 15 years and reviewed annually by the Ottawa County Fire Chiefs Association. The three notable changes, really operationally there wasn't any, but there was some red line versions of there just to highlight for you all. Section 8, there was a question of when does the time start for a mutual aid call? And really it is once we are requested and leave, there's wheels in motion of leaving our community. So that was a start time, so we clarified that language. And then also Section 9, some language in there that keeps the contract in effect while we're working through a new or renewed contract. There was just some concern. There's 17 fire departments, all have a little maybe different governing body. Some are by a board, some are by like us through a city organization. So it was a matter of if we're making attempts to renew the contract and it did expire, it's just a way to keep it so help can always keep coming. So that was the Section 9. And then Appendix B, Battle Lake Area Fire and Rescue Association. Previously, it listed out the townships that they protected or responded to, along with the city of Battle Lake and I think the city of Clitheroe. They, since 15 years ago, had kind of changed their model, and they've become an association. So they have a governing board there, so they wanted that listed rather than the individual townships and municipalities. With that, I'll just ask for any questions.
Thanks, Chief. We can move this to the council.
So move.
Thank you, Scott. Second. Thank you, Laura. Questions for Chief Muckow? All in favor of bringing this to the council on Monday signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thanks, Chief. Next item on the agenda is an update from our friends at West Central Initiative, and we'll call on Samantha Van Letchell-Meyer. Good morning, Samantha.
Good morning. Thank you all for having me this morning. And I first want to start by saying thank you for your ongoing support of West Central Initiative and our work in economic and community development. I'm here to share an update on the work that we've done over the past year for Fergus Falls. So under economic development, we have our loans program specifically to Fergus Falls since January 1st of 2022 to present. There have been 6 loans awarded in the community, totaling $345,800. And in your packet on the right-hand side in the back, you'll find our loan program flyer. This shares some information about our loans program and what we do. This is information that you're able to share with the community if there's anybody looking for some assistance. Under our community development efforts, we do have grants programs that come from West Central Initiative and through West Central Initiative from state and federal partners. There have been 133 grants since January 1st of 2022 awarded in Fergus Falls, totaling $932,845.71. Some of those are through our community fund, our component fund program, early childhood programs, and DEED. Under our community development efforts, we also have transportation planning initiatives, our early childhood initiatives. And I'm going to direct you to the left-hand side of your packet, our annual review. In here on page 10, there is an article on the Pioneer Kids program, which is of course here in Fergus Falls under the Pioneer Care program. And West Central Initiative was a part of that program, getting that set up with our early childhood specialist, Marcia Erickson. We, as an organization, operate as the regional planning organization for our area, as well as the Regional Community Foundation. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and so we do fundraise for our operations under both of those areas. On the right-hand side, you have this small little flyer, and this is about our dual role as a regional development organization and how that previously expired. And through that expiration, in the past, we were not able to accept state and federal funding in our region, and West Central Initiative took on that role and enabled those funds to come back into our region. And then I'm going to share a little bit about a new program that we have going on at West Central Initiative, and that's on page 7 in your annual program here. And that is our rural democracy program. And Mayor Shire is helping partner with West Central Initiative in those initiatives as a leader in that. And so thank you, Mayor Shire, for your work under that program. So in Minnesota, on average, 1 in 21 individuals need to serve in a leadership position like all of you. And in West Central Minnesota, that number is even greater, like 1 in 9 people need to serve in a leadership role. And so this initiative is to help support people who are in leadership roles like mayors and city staff to get the information and skills that they need to support their communities. And then the additional part of this rural democracy program is to help people who are interested in running for leadership positions to gain the skills and information that they need to serve their communities. And so we're really excited about that program, and there's contact information on page 7 there, and you have access to one of our great resources right here. So thank you all for your service to our community and our region and making sure that we have those roles filled. Additionally, I just wanted to share that today I am joined by Commissioner Kurt Mortensen. He is the Vice Chair of our Economic Development District Board, and Tom Rufer also serves on that board for Fergus Falls. And I'd like to invite Commissioner Kurt Mortensen if you'd like to share anything.
Well, simply put, the Economic Development District makes it possible for communities in West Central Minnesota to qualify for federal assistance for infrastructure projects. That's as concise as I can describe that. But it's a pleasure to be here. I get invited by the West Central Initiative for the city visits, and I welcome that opportunity.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you. And then in your packet, you will notice that we have a board member that's right here in Fergus Falls as well, Elizabeth Philasia. And so she is a resource if you know Elizabeth to support you as well. If any questions you have for West Central Initiative, you can reach out to her, but I'd invite questions or anything that we might assist you with now if you have those questions.
Thanks, Samantha. Anyone have any questions for Samantha? There's a lot of information here. I know West Central Initiative does a lot of things in the community and in the region, so we thank you for that. And if the council has any questions, we can digest this information. And thanks so much for being here,
Thank
Samantha.
you.
Thanks, Sam.
All right. Last item on the agenda is a presentation from Summit Carbon Solutions, and so we will welcome them. Good morning.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to give a project update. My name is Joe Caruso, and I'm the External Affairs Coordinator for Minnesota, and that means that I'm responsible for city, county, and community outreach. Some of your faces are familiar. I think we may have met either at county board meetings or some of the public meetings we've held on the project. And for those of you who haven't heard the story, this will be an introduction. This presentation I gave on April 25th to the Otter Tail County Board of Supervisors. I also gave it last week over the noon Rotary Lunch meeting. So it's the same presentation. It's designed to be 30 minutes long. It's not going to take 30 minutes today. We're going to do the short form. And I would ask Andrew to give me the T-5 warning sign, because I like to leave room for questions at the end.
I will do that.
Thank you, sir. And thank you to Andrew and Lynn for coordinating me being here today. So just briefly, Summit Carbon Solutions is a 2,000-mile plus network of gathering and transportation lines to take the CO2 emissions off of the ethanol plants in the Midwest and transport them to a permanent sequestration or storage area in North Dakota. As of today, we're partnering with 34 biofuels plants, and we've changed the word ethanol to biofuels intentionally. Of those 34, 33 are conventional ethanol plants, including Fergus Falls, Green Plains. One of them is a company called GEVO. It's a project that's under development in South Dakota for aviation fuels. So there's a twist here to this that's different than just even 6 weeks ago. The project, as it's designed today, is designed to carry up to 18 million tons of CO2 a year. Now, to put that in perspective, it's hard to imagine what 18 million tons of CO2 is, right? That's equivalent in CO2 reduction to taking 4 million internal combustion engines off the road, ICE vehicles. And at the end of the day, the purpose of this project is to help Midwest biofuels producers, ethanol producers, directly and indirectly, the farm economy through corn, be economically and environmentally sustainable going forward. That's what we're about. There are a lot of industries looking at decarbonization. Any industry like power generation, for example, traditional refinery, oil and gas production that generates a lot of greenhouse gases, they're all looking at decarbonization strategy. Our focus is exclusively on the biofuels industry. This map is important for a couple of reasons. One, it underscores the scope of the project. We're operating in 5 states: Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Iowa. Our parent company is based in Ames, Iowa. There are 3 components to this project. There's the compression facilities that are at the ethanol plants. So our commercial relationship with our biofuels partners is that we will own, operate, maintain, and finance the compression equipment at the plant site. And depending on the plant, that's about $25 to $30 million per plant of spend. But we will have people operating and maintaining those facilities inside the plant gate. Those are the black boxes. And you'll see the one green box that's not connected to anything yet. That's in South Dakota. That's the GEVO aviation plant, aviation fuel plant. The second component of the project are the gathering and transportation lines. So it looks like a spider web. And this is important, particularly to Minnesota, because we don't have one continuous pipeline in the state. If you think of a conventional oil and gas pipeline, say moving oil or natural gas from Alberta, perhaps, down to the Gulf Coast for refining, that would come into the state at one point, leave at another, and it's a continuous line. We are not that in Minnesota. We have 3 separate gathering lines. One we call the Northern Line, or on the PUC docket, it's called the Ottertail-Wilkin Project. The Southern Line, which is, well, we'll come to a state map in a minute that's a little more detailed. The Southern Line down in Martin County, and then the Central Line that runs in west central Minnesota. So we have 3 different projects that don't connect, 3 different lines that don't connect to each other in the state of Minnesota, and we're following a permitting track that's got 3 separate tracks. And then the third component is the gray box in central North Dakota. And the import of that is, this is all about moving the CO2 to a permanent sequestration facility, and the economics of the project don't work, and the environmental sustainability of the project doesn't work if we can't permanently sequester the CO2. So 3 components: gathering and compression, which is basically what you'll see 5 years from now when we're up and operating. That's inside the plant gate at the ethanol plants. The gathering and transportation system that's moving the CO2, and then the third component is the permanent sequestration. So of the 18 million tons of design capacity, we're currently at about 10 million of contracted throughput with the 34 plants. We're continuing to add additional partners to the network, and we've left plenty of headroom on the system for the existing partners to grow their businesses. So this is a schematic that came out of a U.S. Department of Energy report. DOE spent several years trying to catalog, if you will, potential sites for sequestration in the United States. And we found this to be a very useful slide. When I think of the word reservoir, I think of a big void space, a cavern or some other, cave-like structure. The reservoir here is not that. Think of it as a sandstone sponge. If you took a bucket of sand that's full, you could still put a lot of water in that bucket. Try the experiment sometime, it's pretty fun. That's what this is. This is a sandstone sponge that's 1.5 miles underground. And the two features that were important to the Department of Energy when they were cataloging potential sites were the reservoir itself, which is where the CO2 will be stored, and then the cap rock layer, which is that light brown or medium brown layer, a couple layers above it. The import of the cap rock is what you put down there, you want to stay down there. Without a cap rock that's non-porous and non-permeable, you have the risk of upward migration. So those 2 characteristics are what the DOE was looking for when they were cataloging these sites. It turns out, as I put it, Iowa and Minnesota are blessed with some of the most fertile, most productive farmland in the world, right? Well, North Dakota has some pretty cool geology. And they've monetized it once over the last 30 years by making the Bakken work, taking stuff out of the ground. This is about putting stuff in the ground. And one of the questions that came out of our public meetings last year, are we being a bad neighbor? We in Minnesota being a bad neighbor by taking something we don't want, CO2, and dumping it in North Dakota? And the short answer is no. Governor Burgum and a bipartisan group of both political and business leaders are looking to develop this geology as a long-term strategic asset for the state. So financially, they got paid excise taxes, taking stuff out of the ground, oil and gas out of the ground. This has nothing to do with the Bakken. It's physically separate. But the geology is such that we can put stuff in the ground and keep it down there permanently. And the state is looking to develop that as a long-term economic development asset. We could do a lot of cool stuff from an engineering, design, construction, operating standpoint. We could help the biofuels industry remain environmentally and economically sustainable. But if we don't do that safely, this project will be an abject failure, and we get that. And we've borrowed, if you remember the tagline that Ford Motor had in the 90s, quality is job one. To us, safety is priority one. And this industry is novel to Minnesota. There's no CO2 pipeline in the state of Minnesota. It's not novel globally. It's not novel nationally. It's not even novel regionally. There are two operating pipelines in North Dakota, one of which has been in operation for over 50 years. There are about 5,000 miles of installed pipeline nationally, but this represents a 40% increase in the installed base of fuel for CO2 pipelines. The design, construction, material selection, and operation of the pipeline are governed by FSMA, which is the Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration. It's part of the US DOT, and we'll talk about that in just a second. This is a busy slide. I'm not going to drill into it, but the two numbers in yellow are important. And the gist of this is ethanol is really important to the state of Minnesota. It contributed $2.7 billion of GDP to the state last year, and directly or indirectly impacted 26,000 jobs in the state. Think of it this way: every other row of corn in Minnesota is ethanol feedstock. So it's a big impact on the entire ag chain. I apologize for the footprint of this map. It's hard to get this map on one slide and have it look like it's squished, but the import is the states in black: California, Oregon, Washington State, and the province of British Columbia have had for some time low carbon fuel standards in place. The provinces and states in blue, including Minnesota, are provinces and states that are pretty far along in the process of adopting low carbon fuel standards. And the states in that kind of pale mustard color are contemplating low carbon fuel standards. The point is, if you're an ethanol producer today or a biofuels producer today, you're faced with a market that's changing, and the market requirements are changing. This is one way of helping the industry deal with that change. So go back to the state map for a minute. We talked about the northern line, or what's called the Otter Tail Wilkin project. The southern line is in Fairmont, Martin County. They have a lot of things similar. They're very similar in a couple of ways. One, they're both 28 miles long, coincidentally. Two, they both connect to single ethanol plants, coincidentally, that are Green Plains facilities. And they either operate in one or two counties with a relatively few number of landowners. And because we're pursuing a voluntary easement strategy, we do not have eminent domain in Minnesota. The number of landowners is important. So we filed a permit application on the Otter Tail Wilkin project last September. We had our first round of public hearings in Breckenridge on May 2nd, and on Otter Tail in Fergus Falls on May 3rd. And some of you may have heard about those or attended them. If all goes well, we hope to have the Otter Tail Wilkin project permitted a year from now, starting construction in the second quarter of 2024, and trying to complete construction by the end of 2024. Those dates, those estimated dates, apply only to this line. They don't have anything to do with the Martin County line or the central line. And that central line starts in Atwater, Kandiyohi County, runs to Granite Falls, then Lamberton and Heron Lake, and down to the Iowa border. So it's 175 miles long, 4 plants, 7 counties. So it's a different beast from a complexity standpoint. I'm going to skip this slide in terms of brevity. Just a couple of points here. One of the important strategic relationships we developed last year was with Minn Kota Power. Minn Kota is a rural electric co-op that happens to own a coal-fired generating plant that they wanted to decarbonize. So for their own account, they went out and developed and got permitted permanent sequestration storage in North Dakota. And they have way more capacity than they need, and we've entered into an agreement to use their facility if our pipeline is done before our storage facility is permitted. So it's kind of an optionality insurance element to this thing that's important. So last year was a very busy outreach year. We had 15 meetings in 11 venues, including here in Fergus. More than 900 attendees. Most of the attendees were landowners. That was the focus. But anyone and everyone was welcome to attend. The format of the meetings was usually around a meal, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. People had a chance to get food and beverage, hear a brief presentation, and then we broke out into table, small groups at a table level. We would have been foolish to spend the time and money we spent on public meetings had we not listened and learned. So some of the key listenings and learnings went to, I'll come to those in a minute, just finish out the outreach. So we met with all 10 county boards at least once in person, in most cases twice. The COVID public meeting restrictions were coming off last spring, so it was a lot easier to get out and see people. We had some great watershed district meetings. The Public Utility Commission, as part of its regulatory route permitting process, expects all the state agencies who have skin in the game, if you will, meaning that they've got some domain expertise on the project or some interest in the project, to weigh in the regulatory process. Some of the key ones are Department of Health, because they're responsible for drinking water safety. DNR is obvious, and then MnDOT is interested in the project because we're going to be boring under roads. And now, on the legislative front, Senator Rasmussen was very helpful to us. It was unclear in the existing PUC statute as to who had jurisdiction on permitting the route. It just didn't say in the statute. So he co-authored and co-sponsored an amendment that was just passed, clearly giving a PUC statutory authority over the route permitting process. So a couple of the key listenings and learnings. The first one dropped the temperature in the public meeting rooms by about 10 degrees. When people realized that we didn't have eminent domain in Minnesota, you could literally feel the temperature and the blood pressure levels dropping. So that was dramatic. And it's easy to smile, but in other places it's a big issue, particularly Iowa, because other states we do have eminent domain, and it's caused a lot of angst among people. We haven't exercised it anywhere yet, but it's on the table. The other thing that was a common question and common issue that dropped the temperature and blood pressure another 5 degrees was drain tile. Every person at every public meeting, every landowner who we were prospectively crossing their land wanted to know what we were going to do about drain tile. And the easy answer is, if we break it, we fix it. That's in the easement, it's a contractual obligation, but not only do we break it, we fix it, we're actually warranting the repair for the life of the project. Now, as far as we know, no other pipeline of any kind has done that. So that's a big liability. You got to manage that risk, right? So as our risk mitigation management tool, we had Ellingson on board from day one. Ellingson's a Minnesota company, one of the leaders in the drain tile industry, and they're our contractor on drain tile repair. But not just repair, they're helping us document up front where landowner drain tiles are, where the public drain tiles are. So if we know, we have a good feeling, we can miss stuff, we can avoid things. And our basic strategy is to go below everything. So we'll go as deep as we need to go to get below drain tile. The challenge is some landowners have incredibly detailed, precise GIS maps of their drain tile systems, particularly newer ones. Some people can take a napkin and sketch out where great grandpa put in drain tile, or they think they are. So our challenge is to take this really big spread in data quality and make a map out of it that works for construction purposes. But that was the second big point. And the third point, and this is not necessarily in order, but it's operational safety, and we talked about that earlier. FSMA is the governing body nationally for pipeline safety. This industry as a whole has had a very good safety record. There was a significant incident in January of 2020 in Mississippi. I'd be glad to take questions after on that. So 2 maps here, we mentioned this is a 28-mile line initiating at Green Plains, Fergus Falls. 11 miles of it are in Ottertail County, and then 17 miles are in Wilkin County. And this heads west-southwest, crossing the North Dakota border south of Breckenridge. and ultimately connects with another plant out in North Dakota. So with that, I would be glad to take questions. If I move through too quickly, I apologize, but I don't want to leave room for questions here at the end.
Thank you, Joe. Questions for the council? I'm sorry, questions from the council for Joe? Is there any, this is just, obviously this is informational at this point. There's no action that the city will have to take as part of this project at any point, is there?
I don't know. I think there might be some things we need to do on the engineering, on the highway road front.
Sure.
So our basic approach on roads is we will bore everything, whether state, county, or township roads, except for low-maintenance roads that don't have ditches. And when I say bore, we'll start the boring on one side of the road on the private easement, go under the public right-of-way, under the ditch, under the road, back up on the other side. So we're going to go from private to private. We will not ever be in the public right-of-way. There's too much stuff in the public right-of-way that you just want to avoid it from a prudency standpoint.
Thanks, Joe. Just so, can you just give a real high-level explanation of the technology behind? So you're compressing, you're capturing the emissions, you're compressing them, you're sending them in a tube out to North Dakota, then you're putting them 1.5 miles in the ground, and
You got it.
And it just naturally stays there.
Well, that's the cap rock. That's the function of the cap rock. That's why you want to have that non-porous, non-permeable second feature, second attribute. But that's right. So you're going from a high volume of gas, fully permitted. I mean, it's fully permitted at every plant site to emit today, but the policy initiative is to decarbonize.
Sure.
This will allow the industry to compete with having a lower carbon intensity score and therefore a better profile on low carbon fuels. And we turn it into a near liquid form. So it's called supercritical is the technical term, but it's a near liquid form just to reduce the volume of what's being transported. And it's under significant pressure. The operating pressure is 1,200 to 2,200 PSI. The design pressure is 3,100. And it's all carbon steel pipe. Diameter in the state runs from 4 inches here in Otter Tail Wilkin. So it's the smallest segment of pipe in the state. Coming out of that central line, going from Heron Lake down to the Iowa border is a 10-inch line. And ultimately, everything gets wrapped into a 24-inch transmission line to move from Iowa to Dakota.
Sure. Al?
I just got a question. You said a cap rock. So let's say this is a cap rock, and it's 1.5 miles down into the ground. What keeps it here and not going this way where there is no cap rock?
You've got to put the reservoir dimensions have to be smaller than the spread of the cap rock. You've also got a bedrock layer. If someone asked a question about downward migration, DOE really focused on upward migration risk. That's what they were concerned about. But you're looking at reservoir formation that's smaller than the cap rock footprint.
What would contain it on the sides? I guess that's what I'm getting at.
It's the surrounding rock. Because it can move through that sandstone sponge, if you will, but ultimately it's going to hit a border that's not going to be porous. It's not going to be permeable. So sideways migration, but we have to have monitoring and test wells around the perimeter. So we've got 3 of them drilled now just to prove up the geology. And both state of North Dakota and the US EPA have to approve those wells. They're called Class 6 wells. So both North Dakota Department of Resources and US EPA have to approve the sightings. And that's why having that Minn-Kota relationship is important, because if this think about sequencing this, you're building all this stuff at the plant level, you're building the gathering and transmission system, and you're building the storage system. So those can have 3 different sequencing steps to them. Having the Minn-Kota asset in place is really helpful to us.
One last question for me, and you may have just answered this, but back to your question about, like, are we taking something that we don't want to Minnesota and sending it to North Dakota?
It's a bad neighbor.
But is the EPA, is this, so the geology in North Dakota works, but does the regulation in North Dakota also, I mean, is that also a draw?
Yeah.
And is it federally regulated or is it state regulated?
Well, North Dakota has what's called primacy. They filed for primacy. So they have primacy in terms of regulating storage, and they've embraced this as a long-term asset. Wyoming has done the same thing. I grew up in Pennsylvania. Recently, Pennsylvania came out and said they intend to do the same thing. So states that see this geological asset as something that they can monetize over time are stepping into the process. And ultimately, the safety aspect is still regulated by FSMA. The siting and permitting is co-regulated by the EPA and the state.
Okay.
In North Dakota's case. But Governor Burgum has, and it's not just him, it's a bipartisan group of leaders have really embraced this as a long-term asset for the state.
Thanks. Yeah, Scott.
You mentioned that these compression facilities at each plant are going to run 25 to 30 million. So as far as a local impact, that would be the most significant piece of the puzzle that we're going to see here as a city, having that kind of money into a project that will be within our city limits. And that's nice. I guess my question overall, whether it was specifically for the, that facility or for any of them, is where this money is coming from. Is this all private funding that supports this company and this construction and operation, or has this got a lot of federal or other state grants or funds, or where's the money coming from that's paying for all this?
So on that accomplishment slide, I think the first one we had on the top was we crossed over $1 billion of private equity that was raised last year. The total project cost is $4.5 to $5 billion. So the rest of that has to be financed with debt. Now, how did the debt holders and the equity holders get repaid, which I think is the logical question, next question. There are two sources of revenue for the project. The first are the investment tax credits, federal investment tax credits, that go to every gallon of permanently sequestered, every ton of permanently sequestered CO2. So that phrase permanently sequestered is really critical. If you can't document and prove to the IRS that it's down there and stayed down there, the investment tax credit goes away. That goes away, that's a major problem for the project, economics of the project. The second source of revenue is a benefit sharing arrangement with the ethanol plants that to the extent they can lower their carbon scores and achieve low carbon fuel status and get a premium for the low carbon fuel, we share in that benefit, which is frankly how the capture equipment at the plant is paid for. But 5 years down the road, the only thing you'll see above ground are the compression stations at the plant, and you'll see, if you look at the red bow ties, I think there's some red bow ties in the line up here. Those are above ground safety valves that stand about 4 feet high. And they're monitored 24/7, 365 remotely, and they can be they're a ball actuated valve. So if there's a problem on the line, we can isolate the problem on the segment of the line where we think the problem is. So that's what you'll see above ground.
Jim.
I have a question. If you would happen to have a leak in that pipeline, how do you know that?
We're monitoring the pressure and the volume and the temperature along the line. So we can figure out if there's a problem and segment where the problem is. Pinpointing it's harder. Given an exact location is harder, but you can isolate the segment, and it's set up so if the downstream ethanol plants won't be disrupted if we have to shut off a segment.
Okay.
I think I misspoke when I said that the investment would be within our city limits. The ethanol plant's outside the city limits, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, sorry.
We're used to thinking about it in terms of county level property tax impact. So if you're a county commissioner and you're in a county that has both an ethanol plant and a meaningful segment of pipeline, that means there's a lot of capital being invested in a project in your county. So therefore, the property tax base goes up and the taxes we would pay as the operator to the county go up. So we're used to looking at it at the county level. If you take a county like Jackson, it's got a long run of pipe and an ethanol plant in it, I think they're at the top of the food chain in terms of property tax impact. The one other thing I would mention is that, I'll communicate with Andrew to make sure that the council here is aware of what we're communicating to the county board. And we promised to do second and fourth quarter in-person updates for the county boards, which we're just now wrapping up, and then do email updates in the first and third quarter. So we'll make sure that you get the third quarter email update. I think you get direct notice from the PUC on hearings. Our understanding is you get direct notice. And we expect the next round of PUC hearings to be sometime in the fall. And it's a little squishy because a couple people mentioned at the public meetings, it'd be nice not to schedule this in the middle of harvest. So I think the PUC is trying to think about scheduling, but that would be probably October-ish, plus or minus.
Thank you, Joe, for the update, and
Thank you.
appreciate you being here today. With that, I believe there's no other agenda items to come before the council, and we're adjourned.